How you doing, guys? Big Mac Dance School here again today, back once again with another Wizarding Wednesday video for you. Today I'm going to be talking about this. This is the rulebook for the Harry Potter Miniatures Adventure game, and I've had a read through of it. I've not played the game yet, so anything I say in this video is purely related to my interpretation of the rules as I see them. But I'm not going to be going into a massive discussion on the rules and rules that I think are good or anything like that. What I'm going to be doing is basically summarising my thoughts on what games I think you can compare the Harry Potter Miniatures Adventure game to, of the games that I know. So let's just start from what I play most of the time. What I play most of the time is Warhammer 40,000. I've also got Warhammer Underworld Shadespire, so I've got a little bit of experience in that sort of game. I played a little bit of Age of Sigmar, but it's pretty similar to Warhammer 40,000 Age of Sigmar, really. And also I've got some board games as well. But what game would I say the Harry Potter Miniatures Adventure game compares to most? Probably Zombicide of the games I've got. And that's because the way you move, it's not a tabletop miniatures game, really. It's more like a hybrid game. So you play it on the tabletop, of course, but you also play it on a game board. And the game board has squares on it which dictate how far you can move, whereas in something like Warhammer 40,000, where a traditional tabletop game, bolt action, Warhammer Age of Sigmar, like I said, and numerous other tabletop war games, there you use a tape measure and you've got like more free range of movement, and you know, different units move different distances and stuff like that. Where I've not read so far anything that certain units can move further. I imagine there will be some. However, most models can move maximum of 3 inches. From what I've read so far, all models move maximum of 3 inches. But your movement's restricted by certain things like terrain as well, and the way there's terrain, but it's all 2D terrain that you drop a tile onto the board, so you can have a different setup each time. But it's a terrain tile, and depending on the type of outline that it's got, the colour of the outline that it's got, so there's a black one and a white one. And I think there's 3 types of terrain, but only 2 coloured outlines, so I'm wondering if there's a mistake in the rule book. It says something along the lines of difficult terrain slows you down, and it blocks line of sight, and that has a solid black outline, but an impassable piece of terrain blocks line of sight and you can't move across it. Oh, I guess there's the difference, but that also has a black outline, it says in the book, so I think maybe there's a mistake printed in the book. However, yeah, going on to why I think it's like Zombicide, it's not just that you move as the board dictates, effectively. So in Zombicide, you get 2 actions per survivor. The survivors are what you call the players in Zombicide. You get 2 actions per survivor, and you can move twice, or you can move and shoot. You can move, search a room. You can search a room and shoot. Fight in a combat. Those sorts of things. You can only search once, so certain actions that you can only do once in Zombicide, and that goes pretty close to what the rules state in Harry Potter. In Harry Potter, you get 1 basic action and 1 advanced action. The advanced action is something like an attack or casting a spell, and a basic action is walking, moving, or what's the other one? Potions. So you can use your potions, which leads me nicely onto the inventory. So you get a character card in Harry Potter and you get a character card in Zombicide. In Zombicide, you search for things to collect and then you put them into your inventory. It seems similar in Harry Potter, however, there is a slight difference. You pay for the items you have at the start of the battle. So in this way, Harry Potter is more similar to something like Warhammer. So in Warhammer, you have a points value, and you pay the points value, or power level if you're playing power level. You pay for different items to take with your characters, with your units in Warhammer, by adding more points to that unit, and then that unit becomes more expensive. And in the Harry Potter Miniatures game, it's pretty similar, but instead of points, they call them galleons. So Dumbledore, for example, is a particularly expensive character, but then you can take potions which each have their own individual galleon cost, and you can take potions and you can take spells, and each spell has an individual galleon cost, and that's very similar to the way in Warhammer you buy, let's say, intercessors, which is a type of space marine. It's a troop. They have a special thing called, they have plasma rifles, plasma incinerators I think it is, but you can pay for a heavy plasma incinerator or an assault plasma incinerator, and they each have a different point cost. That's the kind of idea that I'm getting at. So it shares similarities with both Zombicide and Warhammer 40,000, but it seems a lot more like Zombicide to me, so it's a lot closer to being a hybrid game, and that makes sense as well, because a lot of people that are going to be attracted to this game and these miniatures are Harry Potter fans and not necessarily tabletop wargamers. So keeping the rules close to something like Zombicide, it makes them more understandable. The more free-form style of players that you get in games like Warhammer and Bolt Action and stuff, they make the rules more complicated effectively, and you'll get certain rules conflicting with each other, and then you've got to try and determine which rule is the best. And in that aspect as well, the Harry Potter game shares, or Night Model's attitude to the Harry Potter game shares something with Games Workshop and their games, the Warhammer games. It's basically that they say the most important rule is that you just crack on with the game, basically. So if you have a disagreement with someone about which rule takes precedent, you might have one potion that does one thing to one of your characters, but your opponent wants to use one of their potions on that same character to do the opposite thing. So if you can't agree on how to resolve that, then you roll a dice, and on a 1, 2 or 3 you're right, on a 4, 5 or 6 your opponent's right. That's the kind of attitude that both companies have towards the games, it seems. I'm not sure if that's been the case with Night Models in the past, with games like the Batman miniatures game and the DC Universe games that they also produce. But it's a sensible thing to just be cracking on with the game, because at the end of the day it is a game, and although at a certain level, like at tournaments and stuff, it can become very competitive, they're essentially, Games Workshop and Night Models aren't too bothered about who buys their games. So the more games they sell, the better. So if you want to get extra competitive with the games, then that's why I think companies like Games Workshop and probably Night Models as well, for tournaments and stuff, whilst they may give you a set of guidelines to follow, they'll often leave it up to people like tournament organisers to interpret the rules their way and to determine conflicts themselves. So there's another question: what are my thoughts on how easy this game will be to pick up and play? I think it'll be quite easy, because I've not played Zombicide in a while until I played it on New Year's Eve, and that's the kind of game where I think Zombicide has a much shorter rulebook than the Harry Potter game. The Harry Potter game, the rulebook is, now this contains scenarios as well, so that skews it a bit, but it's almost 100 pages long, or yeah, 95 pages long, the Harry Potter game. Zombicide's rulebook is only about 20 pages long, but because it shares some similar rules and some similar ideas, it seems like it's going to be quite simple to play, like Zombicide. So it's perfect, therefore, for Harry Potter fans that want to get into this game, just pick it up and play it, and they're not too bothered about it being overly complicated. But with a rulebook that's 95 pages long comes, I think, the idea that you can make the game as complicated as you want to, almost. You can combine certain potions and certain effects of spells and stuff like that in order to make the game more nuanced. Something like Warhammer Underworld Shadespire comes to mind in that instance, where you essentially have a deck of cards in Shadespire, and your characters move around a gaming board with hexagons, but it's a very small gaming board, so you get into action quite quick. When Games Workshop decided to make Shadespire, I think they wanted to appeal to certain people that maybe play games like Magic the Gathering, certain games like that, where it's the kind of game where if you build the perfect deck, you can combine traits on certain cards that will make it really difficult for your opponent to counter the sort of combinations you've got. So with Shadespire and Magic the Gathering as well, I've got very little experience. Well, I've got no experience with Magic the Gathering, so I don't know why I'm talking about that so much. But my understanding of it is that you combine cards to try and outwit your opponent. And with Shadespire, I know that's the case as well. I'm not a massive fan of that type of deck building game. I think it becomes too hard for myself to follow. I don't want to sit there for hours and try and come up with combinations. But I think with the limited number of spells and potions in something like the Harry Potter game, it could be ideal for people just trying to get into gaming, but just pick up and play this particular board game. And the core game in itself is, I think it's the ideal way to dip your toe in the water of tabletop gaming. It's not quite a board game. It's a bit more freeform than a board game, and it's not quite a war game. It's somewhere in between, so that's why I think it's a perfect hybrid game to get new players into tabletop gaming. And I don't think it's too complicated either. I think you'll benefit from having experience with similar games like Zombicide and even like Warhammer 40,000 or various tabletop games, because you're used to the way rules are supposed to interact in those games. So you're less likely to come across any rules that you're not sure how to how they take effect in the game. So if you've got wargaming or board gaming experience, more complicated board games, not the typical ones that you play as a kid or something like that, but if you've got wargaming or board gaming experience, I think you definitely get a grasp on the Harry Potter rules pretty quickly. It's a 95-page rulebook. At one stage, Warhammer 40,000 had something like a 300-page rulebook. So if you've played previous editions, not the current edition of Warhammer 40,000, although there is a bigger rulebook, the current edition is, the core rules are basically 8 pages long. But technically they're not really, because all of the different units and stuff have their own individual rules. So the rulebook for this game, like I said, is 95 pages long, and it's not taking me that long to read through. That's also including the scenarios and stuff, so in truth it's probably about 60 pages long, something like that. I'll flick to page 60 now and see if they're onto the scenarios by then. Yeah, so by page 60 it's talking about cooperative play and stuff like that, so that's giving you a bit more playability, replayability in the game, and it talks about scenarios and stuff by then. So really the actual gameplay rules all come before page 60. The Battle of Hogwarts, which is one of the scenarios, takes place on page 74, and they're into the scenarios by then. Forbidden Forest, a few pages before that. Yeah, so the scenarios start on page 68, and also there's some assembly guides at the start, so realistically you're talking about 60 pages, the rule book. If you've got a knowledge of war games and board games, like I said, I really think it'd be an easy game for you to pick up and play. So if you're thinking about grabbing a few models, maybe consider getting the core game, because for £80 direct from Night Models, or I've seen it for about £68 I think from Element Games and potentially War Games and stores like that, it's worth checking out, I'd say, especially if you've got a birthday or something coming up. We've just had Christmas, so if you didn't get it for Christmas then you probably missed out there. But if you've got a bit of Christmas money to spend and you're looking at a game where you think you might want your family to play with you as well, but you want to paint up the miniatures because they're gorgeous miniatures, and I'd say it's definitely worth dipping your toe in the water of the Harry Potter miniatures adventure game. I'll do another video on my thoughts after I played my first game. I just wanted to get this one out there because a lot of people in previous videos where I've been doing unboxings and my showcase video I did of the core game, my previous videos, a lot of people have been asking when I've shared it on Facebook and stuff, what are the actual rules like. I'd say they're comparable to something like Zombicide. This is to summarise. I'd say they're comparable to something like Zombicide, a bit like Warhammer 40,000 in certain aspects, but it's like a crossover of the two really. So definitely check the game out if you're considering it and think the miniatures will egg people on, that are Harry Potter fans. It might make them take an interest in the game and having a game with you as well. To expand your gaming opportunities is always a good thing, I think, and potentially bring people into the gaming world that weren't, they might have been on the fringes of it. They see you painting and they're like, you know, I couldn't do that. But if you paint the miniatures for them, then it's perfect, isn't it? If they just want to play the game with you a few times. So I'll leave it there for now, guys. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield.